You know, we got a pretty badass Godzilla.
There's no point in a sequel unless you go deeper, harder, stronger, bigger.
I really want to make a Godzilla film that lives up to the legacy that inspired it.
To keep the things about the original that I loved, while at the same time putting it in this new-looking beast, I get excited when I see him.
It's always scary when you take a character as iconic as Godzilla is and who has the long history that Godzilla has had and put him into a movie that delivers on the scope and scale and fun that modern audiences hope to see in a movie theater. And what was really great about Michael Dougherty's take was his keen understanding for how to make it bigger, how to make it more expansive, how to make it more global, and also how to infuse it with a lot of action.
I had been obsessed with the character, the creature, since I was old enough to walk. I used to draw Godzilla in my grade school Bible, much to the chagrin of my nuns. I've seen every incarnation of the character.
Michael Dougherty is a Godzilla geek and fanatic. It was his obsession as a child.
Can you locate Godzilla?
One of my favorite things about Godzilla is that if you look at sort of the long history of him going back to 1954, you'll see that every filmmaker has put their own stamp on the character, and that includes our movie.
Michael tweaked him with Matt Alsop, who was the creature artist who helped refine the first Godzilla in the previous movie to this.
Gareth's film, 2014, we spent a long time working on Godzilla's design, and I really liked what we had. But Mike also had his vision for Godzilla.
I thought Gareth Edwards did a phenomenal job updating Godzilla. At the same time, I just wanted to put my own unique stamp on it. One of the first things that I did was alter his back spikes, because I really loved the spikes from the original film. I thought they're beautifully sculpted, but they also felt like something that nature could have crafted. And so I very simply took a rendering of Godzilla from Gareth's film and just copied and pasted the spikes from the '54 movie onto the back of the modern Godzilla and sent it off to the creature design house and said, it's this. Other than that, we gave him bigger claws because a creature of that size would naturally be a predator.
It's the same Godzilla. The fans will still think he's the same Godzilla. He hasn't changed much, but the super fans will probably notice the small incremental changes we've made just to sort of make him look a little tougher, because the Mutos were a tough enemy. That was just him warming up. That was Godzilla stretching. Like, this time he's really got an enemy to face, and he's bulked up a little bit for it as well.
He's way bigger. This is the biggest I've ever seen Godzilla, height-wise and just solid. You know, he's all muscle.
Is it just me, or has he been working out?
You kidding me? Sarazawa's got that lizard juiced.
So with the new movie, it's really like taking everything that we've learned from that first film with Godzilla and now really getting to play the character to its full potential. And we looked at references of like crocodile and lizard and all sorts of like predators. And then, we looked at people, right? It's like if, Godzilla faces off another monster, you kind of want this moment to feel like it's a gunslinger moment, right? There's like a look, there's an attitude, he's a bit of a brawler, right? He has like that kind of like aggressive attitude that is not only purely animalistic, but that has like a human side to it.
I thought it was important for the creatures to have a certain amount of human emotion. They shouldn't just be 100% animal. Motion capture is a great way to record the performance of an actor, whether it's their facial expressions or their body language or a combination of the two, and apply it to a digital character. It had to be a sort of perfect combination of human fighting to give it that little extra spark, but also something very feral and animalistic.
You know, for us in visual effects, when we animate those creatures, it's like, well, you know, how do we capture interesting moments, like little accidents or little things that are a bit unexpected? It's all about finding the moments that make a performance interesting.
It's hard to make something as cool as Godzilla cooler. And I think our attempt was to give Godzilla a deeper history and a deeper mythology, and with that personality, to really humanize him and make him a character that we could fall in love with.
I like the idea that Godzilla is older and wiser than we give him credit for. It was important to me that we crafted a story that included moments where we got to see Godzilla's intelligence. I think you can see that when Godzilla bends down to look at a small cluster of human beings on the edge of a submarine, there's a moment of recognition there. You can see that he is thinking, he's comprehending, and he's a very curious and intelligent creature. Atomic Meltdown Godzilla actually has its roots in the old Godzilla films. You know, I think every sequel you're expected to sort of up the ante a little bit. We had to find some new, visually spectacular way to have him defeat King Ghidorah that modern audiences hadn't seen before.
He's using the energy that he feeds off of as a weapon. So essentially it's Godzilla distilled down to its most powerful essence. I see that moment as Serizawa's sacrifice realized.
If you watch the film, you'll see that when this sort of radioactive pulse explodes out of his body, there's a trace of Mothra's wing patterns in the energy bubble. It was because of Mothra's death, her sacrifice, that allowed him to become overcharged. So in a lot of ways, it's sort of the perfect symbiotic relationship between him and Mothra. He couldn't possibly defeat King Ghidorah if it wasn't for Mothra's noble self-sacrifice. There are so many moments where Mothra almost steals the movie from me. She's meant to convey a sense of awe and wonder that you don't necessarily have with the other creatures.
I think Mothra will be everybody's favorite monster, at least in their hearts. She is pure good in a lot of ways, and her intention is to take care, to regenerate, to grow.
Mothra was the biggest challenge because it was probably the most back and forth in terms of design to get it right.
You want her to be feminine, but powerful. You want her to have a benevolence, but she's also badass. So visualizing all of that takes everybody working really hard to pull that off.
Meet Titanus Mosura, or as we like to call her,
Mothra.
Something that was really important to me in bringing these characters to life was to stay true to the original films. And there are certain traits that you have to embrace. The fact that Mothra hatches from a giant egg, and her first form is a sort of larval caterpillar. She then enters a cocoon. She hatches from that cocoon as a full-grown, beautiful adult form. And in all the previous films, going back to her original debut, she was worshipped as a goddess. And so that informed how we went about her design. Mothra's a challenge because in the past films, she's essentially just a giant, colorful moth.
She's a giant moth, and it's like, how do you make that look cool and interesting?
But if you go back and you look at moths in nature, they're very diverse. They're beautiful animals. They're not the moths that typically fly out of your clothes in the closet. They're not just these ugly little brown specks. They're just as beautiful and elegant as butterflies. Because Mothra is one of the few female titans, she had to have a feminine quality. I wanted to come up with something that made her feel truly angelic. And so we brought in elements of bioluminescence, which is something that is found frequently throughout nature and seemed like the perfect fit for Mothra. She uses bioluminescence and different colors and brightness to communicate her emotions.
Mike had that from day one. Like, he knew that's what he wanted it to look like.
I felt that Mothra shouldn't just be a moth, that she should embody the traits of a lot of different insects.
We did look at creatures like the praying mantis, because they're quite elegant, but they're also incredibly deadly.
This might sound strange. I'm a huge fan of Mother Nature and insects especially. I mean, I hatch praying mantises every spring just for fun. And praying mantises are beautiful insects. And so I wanted to embody some of the different traits that other insects have in nature, including different physical capabilities for defense or attack. Longer legs, claws. I want to come up with something that was beautiful and angelic and powerful, but also deadly when she needed to be. Because if any animal is going to survive in a world filled with other giant monsters, like Rodan, King Ghidorah, or Godzilla, they would have certain defense mechanisms, which is why we gave her a stinger. Mothra's got a really interesting soundscape.
It's like a song.
She is a mix of different kinds of insects. Something that we listened to as an example were the sounds of crickets that were slowed down exponentially to the point where when you hear them, it almost sounded like an angelic chorus. And I think she uses sound as a method of communication even more than the other creatures do.
She has the most vocal range, to me, out of all the creatures, because she goes through her own development from the larva stage to a beautiful butterfly or moth. Her vocalization changes along the way. And she's the only creature that really gives an inviting sound.
Whether it's the chittering, the screeches, there's something very pleasant and musical about the way that she sounds. You could almost put it on in the background as like Zen ambient music if you wanted to.
We wanted it to feel in some way like Mother Earth calling out to us.
Mothra, queen of the monsters.
There's a very noble quality to Mothra. Unlike all the other creatures, Mothra had an intelligence and a sense of kindness about her, that she was Mother Nature's protector. Every time she shows up in the story, it changes the energy of the movie. Everything becomes figuratively and literally brighter. I was already in love with Mothra before we started the movie, and then as it progressed, I only fell in love with her even more. Godzilla fans have very high expectations and demands for King Ghidorah. And he's just as beloved as Godzilla himself. You literally have two kings squaring off against each other.
That's the Super Bowl to a Godzilla fan.
Any fan needs to be able to see it and say that's King Ghidorah. But at the same time, you want that modern, realistic interpretation of that.
Whether it was visual design of the creature, or his performance, his sound, we had to be willing to push the boundaries a little bit.
Ghidorah, the one who is many. He's not part of our natural order, and he's not meant to be here.
A false king.
There are certain traits, certain strands of DNA that have persisted in every incarnation of the character from his first introduction back in the 60s. He's golden, 3 heads, very strange bat-like wings, and a very distinct cackle. King Ghidorah very clearly has his origins in the legendary Greek Hydra, but the way that he looks is based more on Eastern mythology. If you really look at his head, his facial features, his horns, even his scales, and just the overall flow of his body, it's very much an Eastern dragon, which is distinct from Western style.
Ghidorah for me was the scariest one of all of them because each head has a character and a different personality and a different role.
It was important to me that King Ghidorah display a certain amount of intelligence and ferocity and really give him a personality. So we took 3 very talented performance capture artists and essentially tied them together so that each head would have its own individual reactions during a confrontation. Motion capture is a great way to record the performance of an actor, whether it's their facial expressions or their body language or a combination of the two, and apply it to a digital character. In a lot of ways, it was like we were going back to the techniques they used from the 50s to the 70s. You're still relying on the performances of human actors to bring these 350-foot tall creatures to life. So it was sort of the modern way of doing a man in a rubber suit.
There's a few little moments in the movie where you get to see the 3 of his personalities interact. And for me, those are the moments where I can emotionally connect to him.
The center head is the very serious alpha who really calls the shots. And then the head on the right was always a bit more aggressive, tenacious, the one sort of itching to get into the fight. The head on the left, we saw as a very sort of curious, almost inquisitive head, who is a little bit more playful. So in Antarctica, for example, when he first rises up out of the ice, there's a moment when he spots human soldiers firing guns at him. Now, he's been asleep for millions of years, so theoretically, he's never seen this before. So instead of just creating a moment where he just steps on them or blasts them, I wanted to just have the briefest moment where he sort of bends down out of curiosity and sort of just sniffs them out before ultimately deciding, okay, these guys suck, let me just get them out of the way, and he just completely fries them. But even then, one of my favorite moments actually is when he bends down and sort of just licks the corpses of the soldiers that were there.
And then the alpha head in the middle yells at him and nudges him, tells him to stop.
The center head is always the one that's trying to get the other heads back on track. It's a bit like the Three Stooges.
What about Mo, Larry, and Curly over here?
But it really did help the visual effects artists, the creature animators, to give it just a little bit of an extra spark. With King Ghidorah, we went back and listened to all the original cries and roars and screeches from the classic Toho movies and tried to come up with something that was familiar and tip the hat to those cries, but also was something fresh and original. And so we went to an animal wrangler and recorded the sounds of snakes hissing, a rattlesnake. So it was a lot of fun to try to create something that was unique and modern, but also harken back to the old school movies to satisfy the fans. From the first time we see him in the movie, I wanted to make sure that the audience knew that we were dealing with something very different than what Godzilla had faced in the previous film. Rodan is a really fun character to bring to life. He brings a sense of power and speed that some of the other Godzilla creatures don't have. The ferocity of a creature of that scale that could fly has never really been truly captured. He could use his wind to just swoop over a city and completely decimate it. We called him the King of the Skies. Rodan is one of my all-time favorites because he could fly, and I was really into the idea of introducing him to the mix because we could then have some really potent aerial battles. Whether it's Rodan fighting the Air Force, or Rodan fighting Mothra, or fighting King Ghidorah, he brought a whole new axis to the film.
Rodan was a tricky one because we'd already had a flying creature in the previous film. We'd had the Muto. We didn't want it to look the same or similar to the Muto. The first few sketches almost looked like the Muto again. So it was just finding a design that felt fresh, but recognizable as Rodan.
We went back and looked at the original movies. We started with the silhouette. And with Rodan, the color palette was a sort of burgundy red color palette. 2 horns on the head, sometimes 3, but usually 2. He had a very spiky chest, and he always had a sort of more bird-like appearance than Godzilla or any of the other creatures.
As I was working, Mike would always be texting me pictures. And I remember for Rodan, when I was doing some early keyframes and storyboards, there was a lot of reference of the vulture, especially for the face.
So everything from vultures, eagles, hawks, tried to look at their body language, their claws, their eyes, and we're talking about a creature which in our film has been hibernating inside of a volcano. So instead of having traditional reptilian scales, this creature has managed to adapt to living inside of a volcano by sort of growing an outer shell of volcanic rock.
It's got this like molten, hard flesh to it that's reminiscent of the volcano, the environment it comes from. And I think that really made the design unique.
And then on top of that, we went out and recorded the sounds of owls, penguins, a vulture named Steve. We're trying to record his sounds, and he's going after the toes and legs of our recordists. And then my favorite addition, my mom has a group of cranes that visit her in Florida every now and then. So she is constantly sending me video clips of these cranes. And so I sent the video clips to my sound guys, and they added some of those clicks and vocalizations to Rodan's cries. So thanks, Mom. He's a fascinating character to me because his loyalties are vague. You're not quite sure which direction he's going to go in. In some of the previous films, he's Godzilla's ally, sometimes not. Much like Ghidorah, I wanted to get a sense that there was sort of a dark intelligence in his eyes.
My favorite performance moment of Rodan is in the chase sequence outside of Isla de Mar, where he's doing his best to dismantle all the different jets. And there's this moment of understanding where he shows his intelligence, where there's a plane trying to veer away from him, and he side-eyes the plane. And it's this moment where he knows more than we do, and then he goes into this barrel roll spin, and in one move, obliterates the entire fleet. It points to a deeper intelligence, a deeper personality.
I think that's what makes him really unique and special.
Maddie, wait!
The birth of Mothra is a tricky sequence because it's the first time we see one of the Titans in the movie.
From the first time we see Mothra, she's meant to convey a sense of awe and wonder that you don't necessarily have with the other creatures. You know, if you saw King Ghidorah or Rodan rise up out of the ground, I think your first instinct is to get the hell out of there. But Mothra, even in her larval form, is meant to communicate something wondrous.
And with that, we wanted to balance out the awe and wonder of this creature coming to life. And on the other hand, there's the terror of something that's so powerful and potentially destructive in front of us. Mothra typically originates from Infant Island in Toho mythology. And we wanted to expand upon that. Not that she doesn't still originate there, but since she's always going through the cycle of rebirth, reincarnation, this is Mothra, 2.80. She's been in existence since potentially the beginning of Earth's creation. And so we picked the temple because we wanted to feel like a cathedral to honor her.
Mike had a really specific vision for Mothra's lair. The Mayan texture, jungle, the Amazon, but the focus was always the egg. And he had a lot of reference towards the actual vines growing through and surrounding the egg, almost like it's in a nest. And he also wanted a lot of hieroglyphs on the walls that depicted Mothra and the fact that these ancient people used to worship her. She was a deity to them.
Hey, marker.
And action.
Containment team, move into primary position.
Your time has come.
I love Mothra's birth. I think Mothra's birth is gonna be the most beautiful reveal of any of the monsters, though. And I love that she's a woman. She's the only female monster, and it's just this beautiful moment of seeing her, like, blossom and come up.
In my mind, Mothra always has sort of the collective memories of the previous Mothras that might have existed. So when she hatches, she might have expected to see the twin fairies that normally accompany Mothra on her adventures, at least in the old Toho movies. But instead, she finds herself surrounded by guys with guns. As the scene progresses, there's a tonal shift.
What's happening?
Human beings, as we normally do, kind of mess things up. We tend to fire the first shot.
Containment team, stand down. I repeat, stand down. You are scaring her.
Mothra is a peaceful creature, but it's our perception of her that makes her dangerous. In that moment, she shifts into the destructive power of nature. She starts destroying the environment around her.
But even when she defends herself, she's not using true deadly force. You know, she's using webbing to pin a guy against a wall. She throws another guy into a bit of webbing.
No!
Dr. Russell, I'm sorry, but you know the protocols. We have to terminate.
I'll handle this.
When Vera Farmiga's character goes out on the catwalk, she doesn't use hostile force. You know, she tries to scare Vera off. Vera Farmiga tries to course correct using the orca. Mothra is sort of the ambassador of the Titan kingdom, in that she's the creature that best represents a chance for establishing communication and a relationship between human beings and the Titans, which is why there's that very poignant moment when Millie Bobby Brown actually reaches out to touch her.
was there for the birth of Mothra, and I was there for the death of Mothra. Sorry. I think that was probably the hardest scene, one of the hardest scenes in the movie, emotionally, because I was there to nearly touch the monster, and then I saw her pass away, so it was really hard. It was hard. It was like, because I remember that night, I was working with Kyle and Vera and Shay, and Michael comes up to me, he's like, Millie, you nearly touched this monster. Like, this monster is trying to save you now, and yet, you know, she's going to die, and, you know, you was there for the birth of it. And I just started immediately crying about a monster, and so that worked in the scene, but yeah, it gets you.
We're trying to show a new side to these creatures. That they aren't just vicious monsters, that they're just as complex and capable of showing affection or intelligence and emotion as human beings are.
Something's wrong. He's never been this close before.
When you tackle a sequel, you have to come up with new ways of reintroducing characters into the film that haven't necessarily been done before. One of my favorite aspects of the 2014 film was Monarch. And what I loved about Monarch is that it was your classic science fiction secret organization, but instead of being devoted to tracking down superheroes or international spies, their main focus was giant monsters. To me, it's the definition of a dream job.
Monarch is uniquely prepared to determine which of these titans are here to threaten us and which of these titans are here to protect us.
And so Zach and I thought that, well, this is a great opportunity to really peel back that curtain and go in and see what Monarch is really capable of.
Raptor 1, you are cleared for assisted descent to pad 4.
And an underwater base just seems like the ultimate dream home for an organization like Monarch.
Sensor set for 3 meters, beginning subsurface descent.
This is new.
Yeah, we call it Castle Bravo, our new flagship facility.
The underwater base is like the gigantic James Bond-esque environment, but you know, it showed, you know, there's the whole arsenal of Monarch in there. You know, they have labs where they study mutos, and they have like nuclear submarines, you know, to go study the depth of the ocean.
The story that's going on in its most stripped down version is it's man against monster, it's man against nature, and the monsters being the most vivid manifestation of nature. So it was interesting to me to see if there was a way to communicate that in our Monarch underwater base. At the end of the day, what we manifested was man bringing all of his know-how into the architecture of the place, which is this big, brutalist bulwark burrowed into a mountain out of some of the huge rock walls that are naturally there that they used because they're trying to work with nature. That's part of our story. You see fossils of ancient creatures and monsters and all that. That's just part of their day-to-day work environment. So if you're an observant Monarch worker and you're paying attention to where you are, you're constantly reminded of what you're doing and hopefully why you're doing it.
All personnel, report to battle station, code red.
The first time we see Godzilla in the movie, we wanted to keep the tension of, is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? Is he with or against us?
He's taking our observation drones.
Trajectory. Straight at us, 1,200 meters and closing.
And so we kind of see it through the eyes of Kyle Chandler's character, Mark, who has a very sort of Captain Ahab, Moby Dick relationship with Godzilla.
Tragedy was brought to my family from Godzilla's actions. It caused a rift in my life with my wife, and I've sort of retreated into my own world.
He blames Godzilla for his son's death, and this is the first time he has seen this creature since that tragic day. And so it's meant to sort of be an emotional moment for him, where we sense the pain and uncertainty, but also the hope that this might be the beginning of an alliance between humans and Godzilla.
Open the shields.
Oh, yeah, sure. Let's bring him in for a beer. You out of your goddamn mind?
We really wanted to get across Godzilla's ability to communicate and this idea that he is, for Mark to understand him as some kind of an animal first is because Mark, his connection to nature is through his study of animals. And so if he can see Godzilla as an animal, at least that's the first step to understanding him. So Godzilla's flashing lights would be his way of sending a signal, like it's said in the movie, like a gorilla pounding its chest. It's an intimidation display. It's letting the audience know, here's an intelligent being that's bringing to us something that we're not aware of yet. Godzilla knows something we don't.
What are you doing, dude?
For us, it was Godzilla understanding that impending doom is rising. And it could be Ghidorah, it could be the use of the orca, but he knows that he's gonna need humanity's help, and so he's coming to warn us, to let us know that there's danger out there.
Hey, what's with the light show?
I think an amazing visual is when Godzilla, we're in the underwater base and Godzilla's actually swimming towards the base and we see him. It's actually a powerful scene where you see everyone stop and the camera's just panning and you get different angles, everyone's kind of in their positions, but you can see the incredible diversity in this cast and you can see just this awesome group of people working and diverse group of people working together. We all get scared together. Then we all like exclaim together, like, oh my gosh, we didn't die. And next thing you know, he comes back again and scares us again. But it's like, I just think there's something so powerful about that one moment where we're all just staring at Godzilla in awe.
Can we maybe close the shield now?
Mother of God.
Run.
Ghidorah's awakening was always meant to take place in an environment that sort of felt like a natural extension of him. Somewhere desolate and cold and dead. So Antarctica felt like a no-brainer. But also Antarctica is a very mysterious place. You know, we don't really know what's under the ice sheets there. At one point, that continent could have been thriving with life. You know, it seemed like a place where if there was an ancient civilization that had any interaction with these creatures, it would have been in Antarctica.
With the Monarch Antarctic base, we wanted it to be like much of their other operation. On the surface, it's a small-scale operation, but when you dive deeper, it opens up into a whole nother world.
With Mothra's temple, it's almost a very inviting and warm place, you know, filled with nature and sunlight and even plant life, contrasted with Ghidorah's lair, which is a very dead and cold environment. And then obviously seeing him in the ice while frozen is meant to be a very daunting, almost mural.
The fact that he's trapped in the ice hints at a deeper history. Well, how did he get in the ice? Did Godzilla trap him in the ice before? We wanted to really build a mystery around what this creature is going to be. Because ultimately, it's our lack of understanding of him, Emma's misinformation, that causes her plan to unravel. Millie Bobby Brown gives a great performance in that moment of the awe and dread of seeing this creature trapped beneath the ice. We really, really wanted to build that mystery there, and I think the cold, harsh environment helped us a lot.
And also what it allowed was a place for us to have a first confrontation between Godzilla and Ghidorah that we hadn't seen in previous Godzilla films. We've seen monsters fight in cities multiple times, and of course we still do that. But to have their first confrontation in a sort of more open, vast, natural environment just felt a little bit more intriguing. We brought back Ken Watanabe and Sally Hawkins from the first film.
They are, in a lot of ways, the mother and father of the Monarch organization. And since they both die in the movie, it makes it all the more tragic because we've grown to love them through their protection of humanity, through their reverence of these creatures.
Ready, and action! Boys!
What's funny about the Antarctica sequence is we never set foot on a single patch of actual snow or ice. It was all done on sound stages in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's the beauty of the technology these days, is that there are just certain environments that you can completely create by combining your live action footage with the computer to create a very convincing exterior location.
I don't remember who came up with it, but we had all these different various ways to make snow, and Epsom salt became the way to do it. I wish I knew how many pounds of Epsom salt we actually used.
You know, we're in this like football field sized thing. It's hot. It was August then in Atlanta, and we're in full down gear with these odd little cooling suits. And you run through the salt while you look up at a dot and run away from it. And they throw salt on you.
We're running from, Ghidorah and Godzilla fighting over here. We're trying to get to the Osprey, and we're running from one end of this space that is probably the size of a football field that they've created, full of Epsom salt on the ground and fake ice cubes.
And we sort of reused the exact same Epsom salt field, shot from different angles, filled that with fake snow and wind and atmosphere to create what felt like vast stretches of icy tundra.
The tail then, so that was a head, and there's a big head moving over to the left there. And another head, and it's swinging over to the right. And now, big head coming up towards you.
Ghidorah displays curiosity about humans.
Ghidorah, who's essentially defrosted after like a bunch of years, being locked up and being frozen.
And the first thing he encounters are little tiny people with guns. And so instead of simply just smashing them, I wanted him to sort of bend down and take a look and sniff at these annoying, pesky little mammals.
Oh, shit.
Local legends call it Rodan, the fire demon.
Rodan's rise out of the volcano was a bit of wish fulfillment. Something I loved about the original Rodan movie was that he's always had a connection to volcanoes. And so it seemed like a no-brainer to reintroduce Rodan by having him be rebirthed from a volcano.
We really wanted to give Rodan this persona of a fire demon, and seeing him basking in this lava as he comes out, it's a pretty impressive image. It's a very threatening image. And so it escalates the threat in the movie.
Something that Zach and I tried to do with this film is embrace ancient folklore and mythology and blend them with these creatures. And so Rodan became a phoenix, an ancient fiery bird that perishes but is also reborn in the process. But it also provided the foundation for a kick-ass giant monster sequence. In any Godzilla movie, you do have to have at least one sequence that features thousands of people running in terror from a giant monster. Obviously, in the old movies, it's usually hundreds of Japanese people running through Tokyo screaming, but in this case, we set the volcano in Mexico.
Hey! Go! Uno!
As a director, you have your hands full handling main unit, which typically features your main cast and a lot of those scenes that they're in. And then you have to be willing to entrust a good chunk of scenes to second unit. And so second unit will pull off a lot of action and destruction and people running in terror. And the Rodan rising out of the volcano sequence was one of those.
Mexico, loving life, doing it big. You know, it's an evacuation scene because we got a bird coming out the volcano. And if you know anything about biology, that's never good.
Mexico was fun. Once again, that was the G team having to stick together. Well, my man Zach had to hold us down out there. He's the co-writer on this.
Taking the Rodan volcano sequence and getting to actually go to Mexico City for a week and work with Tommy Harper, the second unit director and stunt coordinator, was, for me, the most fun part of the movie.
We were down there for, I think, about 3 days and working with like thousands of background and having the whole square shut down. It was an amazing experience.
We shot for 3 days outside in the streets of Mexico City, thousands of extras running around, explosions going off. So it had that fun of being outdoors and really feeling like we were interacting with real people and a real environment.
We were in Mexico in this beautiful old town, but they're like, yo, there's a volcano about less than a mile away. It's going off. We gotta evacuate all these people. We're in the hot weather. We're outside in the middle of the day and just saving all these people. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really cool.
Hang on, kid! You bring something that seems so far-fetched into a real environment. It creates an amazing visual scope for the movie. And that's what I think the Rodan sequence did.
Yeah, Rodan's just got so many interesting twists and turns. When he first emerges from the volcano, you know, he's waking up from a nap like Rip Van Winkle, and his first opponents are us because we're peppering him with missiles and bombs in an attempt to lure him away from this village, which he's on the verge of destroying. So his first instinct is to completely destroy this Monarch fleet of fighter jets and Ospreys. But that's all a ruse to lure him into a battle with King Ghidorah. And what I admire about that moment is that Rodan quickly abandons his plans to tear the fighter jets apart, and he decides to go up against King Ghidorah, which takes some balls if you think about it. It doesn't go too well for him. And that's when he takes another interesting turn, is that he realizes he's outmatched, that he's defeated, and that he's not the alpha. And so it's the first time in the film when you see one kaiju sort of bend the knee to another kaiju. And it's when you realize that King Ghidorah really is the new king of the monsters, that this new sheriff in town. Is that if this creature is willing to then serve this three-headed monster, then the other creatures, the other titans in the film might do the same.
This is his home.
My God. Godzilla has always risen from the depths of the ocean. But something that we had never seen before in a Godzilla film was where he goes when he returns to the ocean. I saw that as an opportunity for the first time in 60+ years of Godzilla films. Let's see where the guy goes to hang out and rejuvenate.
Doctor? Launch probes.
Designing Godzilla's lair was one of the reasons I wanted to do the show, because it hasn't been seen before. And it was a very interesting task to decide what that was going to be.
Range 1,000 meters.
Obviously, it's deep, deep underwater.
Steady.
And then you wound up in this graveyard of all of these ships and aircraft and all that from the beginning of time, it seemed like. And after you passed an ancient Norse god's boat, you rounded a corner and suddenly you were in the remains of a ruined city underwater, but it was a full-fledged, huge city with all of the sculptures and bas-reliefs and all the totems that you would imagine. But it's the kind of place that you would think would be above ground as opposed to underground. And the backstory is the cultures of the world were in harmony with the monsters, and they were also in harmony with each other. So no matter where you went in the world at that period of time, you would see a culture that was consistent with the other cultures in the different parts of the globe, completely unlike how it is for us.
All the legends, the stories, they're true. They really were the first gods.
With that knowledge, all of our disparate sites, Mothra's temple in China, Godzilla's lair underwater, Rodan's volcano, there's a visual continuity in what we see in terms of the symbology in their environments. And that really hits home once we're in Godzilla's lair.
With Godzilla's lair, what we were trying to get across is the idea that mankind built this place as a sort of temple to Godzilla.
My God, Zilla.
And that this environment would have been filled with radiation and heat that a creature of that size would need in order to rejuvenate himself. It's almost like Godzilla's day spa.
So, dude's got this covered, right? He just needs a little nap.
No, this process could take years.
We have to proceed as planned.
There's a sequence in the film where Dr. Serizawa decides to sacrifice himself to save Godzilla.
Okay, what if we go inside, set a timer, and blow up the warhead manually?
No way. If the heat doesn't fry you, the radiation will.
When the only course of action they can take is to detonate this nuclear warhead in Godzilla's lair.
I'll go.
And the way we treated it was as if we were passing through the threshold into the kingdom of a god. For Serizawa, that journey is marked with that type of imagery, the way he submerses himself, looking at his friends in the water, kind of sealing his fate. And then he passes through the tunnel, it's going towards the light. It is very much his passing on, and he comes up through the water on the other side to reveal his heaven. Bear McCreary did an amazing job. It's my favorite piece of music for the whole movie because it is so emotional and it carries that religious weight.
Most of that environment was CG. The only thing we built for the lair was the staircase that led up to Godzilla's altar. I found it to be a very emotional scene. I mean, if I was going to go out, I'd love to go out sacrificing myself to Godzilla, you know? And I think for Ken, it meant a lot too, because Godzilla is an icon in Japan. And he definitely brought a very natural reverence for the character while we were shooting it.
We had the idea that Godzilla's on his last breaths, and as he takes this exhausted exhale, it clears the way for Serizawa to approach him, and we reveal his face for the first time and how wounded and how sympathetic he is in that moment. It most embodies what we wanted to achieve with Godzilla in the movie, which was pulling back the curtain on the monster of him and revealing the character underneath.
Ken just brought so much emotion and sincerity to that moment, even though he was acting against something that wasn't really there. All we had of Godzilla was a square piece of his skin, and Ken still managed to bring so much emotion to the moment, especially when he reaches out to touch Godzilla. I think this is actually the first Godzilla film where a human being touches Godzilla in a meaningful way. There's only one line of dialogue, which is, "Goodbye, old friend." And in the original script, that was written in English. But at the table read, Ken said it in Japanese. And that was completely his invention. But it was just one of those moments where it felt like so obvious. You know, of course, it sounded so much better in Japanese, because of course he would say it in Japanese.
Saraba.
And that is meant to be a moment where a covenant is formed, a bond is rekindled. Because in my mind, Godzilla remembers humans, that there was a time when Godzilla and humans had a kinship, and that over time, that relationship was severed. But now that he's resurfaced and the other creatures have resurfaced, that relationship, that bond needs to be reformed.
Hello everyone, it is Millie Bobby Brown on the movie Godzilla. Say hi to our great director, Michael Dougherty.
Who are you?
I don't know.
Part of my process for writing a script often involves doing screen grabs or image searches of actors or actresses who you think would be great in the role. And Millie Bobby Brown was the person we thought of for Madison. When we were doing previs animation, I told the previs animators, like, yeah, use Millie Bobby Brown for Stranger Things. And then it was finally brought up, well, why don't we just see if she actually wants to play the role? And had a great meeting with her and showed her the previs, which was fun because I don't think she'd ever actually seen a 3D animated version of herself. And it was a very cool scene where she faces off against Ghidorah one-on-one.
I've seen a lot of previs from Michael, and he's shown me so much that I just cannot wait. I mean, I'm gonna be 15 when the movie comes out. I'm 13 right now, so my 15-year-old self, I hope you enjoyed the movie.
Talking to her outside of being Madison as a person, Millie, it's disarming how put together she is and cool and thoughtful of a person. It's incredible and it's inspiring, and it's also really makes you feel bad about yourself because you see a 13-year-old kid, and she's got more confidence and point of view than most adults that I know.
Millie Bobby Brown is a 41-year-old woman trapped in that body. I haven't seen Stranger Things. I'm sorry, Millie. I haven't seen Stranger Things, so I didn't know what she looked like. And I just saw this like little person. She was speaking so clear. And it was just like, there's no way this chick's 13. And yeah, she's like at least 37, at least 37.
Come on, let's go find some monsters.
My Millie monkey, she's a goofball of the highest order. And we connected right away. I mean, we have no choice but to connect with a film like this unless you really care about the nucleus of this family and you root for them. And you see the love and you experience that. So, of course, we, I mean, just naturally, she and I, personality-wise, connect. But she's like, we spend our time just goofing off on set and harmonizing to Adele or Little Einsteins. When we'll be fighting over who takes the melody and who finds the harmony.
We sing children's songs. You'll find us singing like Little Einsteins, and when we're on like the Osprey, we're singing Little Einsteins in a scene, yeah.
She's always pranking me on set, and there's not a day that goes by where I don't open the fridge and 1,000 colorful balls pop out, or she's a little rascal, and I just love that energy on a set.
I know. I figure out what the hell if I signal that might stop.
Get away. Michael Dougherty has made me a paranoid person, you guys. I'm like, oh, somebody's gonna prank me. This is how, did you see this though? I'm like so scared because I know every day people scared.
She's restored my faith in humanity to a certain degree because she's just so excited. And we had a special connection over our mutual love of nature and animals, which is a very big recurring theme in the film. What I really admire about her is her strength, her intelligence. They are the traits that I was looking for in the character, and thankfully the actual actress embodies all of those things.
Goodbye.
As you can see from the set around us, Monarch have some pretty fun toys.
Monarch is an organization that's grown up now in a world where we know these creatures exist. So they have every resource they could need at their disposal. They have incredible aircraft, incredible bases.
There's a lot of toys, underwater base, underwater subs, harpoon turrets that hold monsters down. There's all kinds of stuff.
To me, it only made sense that when facing the potential threat of giant monsters, humans would do what they do best, which is build bigger weapons and bigger vehicles to confront that threat. Ever since 2014, when the monsters really became a problem, they've stepped up their game. Basically, any environment where they might encounter these creatures, Monarch and the military have come up with sleek new technology to deal with that. Mankind will never go down without a fight.
The Godzilla story takes place on planet Earth. We're, nudging it a bit toward the future in the technology that Monarch is behind. But basically, it all has to be grounded in a way that's familiar, but also just has enough of a nudge to be next gen.
That was how we would treat their vehicles and devices and capabilities. Where will we be in 5 years? Or probably, where is the government actually right now?
Barnes, contact the Argo.
Yes, ma'am.
The Argo was meant to be something that felt like we could have and would have constructed to deal with giant monsters, something that could get from point A to point B using supersonic technology, that could launch Ospreys or other vehicles if it had to.
It's basically a flying aircraft carrier at a certain point.
There's a lot of gadgets in this film, most notably the Argo, in which we're shooting endless scenes on. The Argo is this massive ship that is so big I don't know if it could fly, and also has hovering VTOL capabilities. As an aviator, I call baloney. But it's still pretty fun. It's still cool.
Argo to Gold Squadron. Let's lure this turkey away from the mainland straight to Monster Zero.
The Argo allowed our characters to be in the middle of the action. Because a lot of Godzilla films tend to depict your human being sort of locked away in fortified bunkers, watching everything on a monitor, whereas the Argo allowed us to actually put them in the action. They're putting their lives on the line by actually flying to where these events are taking place.
We lost the squadron. ETA to Monster Zero, 30 seconds.
I love the concept of an armored flying vehicle to take on Rodan, Ghidorah, or Godzilla, but really wanted to come up with something that felt real. The Argo was meant to be sort of a tip of the hat to Flying Wings, the stealth bomber.
The interesting challenge was to keep it grounded, but also give it a little extra life without turning things like gigantic carrier airplanes into spaceships.
I've always been impressed by sort of the whole line of Flying Wings. They felt like something that would have rolled out of Area 51, from reverse engineering alien technology, maybe.
At the center of our story is this instrument called the Orca, which Emma has created, which is a vehicle for communication with these creatures. Emma has always believed that there should be a way to communicate through the bioacoustics, to sort of DJ music into these monsters' life, to be able to control them.
The Orca is a device which was created to communicate with whales and dolphins, specifically to keep whales and dolphins away from shorelines. It's an example of technology which is created with the intent to better understand the creatures, but which certain characters then corrupt to potentially weaponize.
Creating a device that creates these huge sounds that can travel all the way around the world, and is something that we can't actually hear, like a dog whistle. How do you bring that to cinematic life? It's a big task. And we treated it like a fun little science experiment, where we started building, okay, it has to be durable, it has to be portable, it has to have speakers. And it was really just like two kids making up this device and what it would be.
We wanted the Orca to feel like something that could exist, something that was real. But also, because it's a prototype, we didn't want to feel too sleek and modernized, not something that was designed by Apple. But it was a joint effort between our prop designers and also our graphic designers, because the interface for the device had to feel realistic. This is something that generates sonic waves, but is also capable of listening and translating the biosonar of the creatures themselves.
Dr. Sarazawa, Colonel Foster, we have been developing a prototype for a new weapon, an oxygen destroyer, designed to exterminate all life forms within a 2-mile radius.
The oxygen destroyer has its roots in the original '54 film. In that movie, it's the plot device that is used to eventually kill Godzilla.
With any luck, it will kill these things, and this nightmare will finally be over.
It just seemed like a ripe opportunity to sort of reintroduce the oxygen destroyer in this movie.
10, 9.
It seemed to make sense that the military would be secretly working on a weapon, even something that Monarch wasn't aware of at the time. The intent of it really was to show the stupidity of human interference. It comes into the film at a key point when Godzilla and Ghidorah are fighting under the ocean. And Godzilla has torn off one of Ghidorah's heads. If Godzilla was allowed to continue what he was doing, he probably would have won. Humans, again, as we tend to do, refuse to allow nature to do its thing. The oxygen destroyer destroys our only chance of beating Ghidorah, which was Godzilla. And Ghidorah is unfazed by the weapon because he's not necessarily of this earth. Sarazawa's submersible was a fun little project because we knew that we wanted Sarazawa to take a small sub into Godzilla's lair. The hard part was that a lot of modern day submersibles aren't all that aesthetically pleasing.
The real submersibles that are used today, most of them are clunky and very spherical so that they can handle the pressure of being so deep underwater.
And we wanted something a little bit more aerodynamic, something a little bit sleeker.
We wanted to feel like it's a rocket shooting him into the next life, as opposed to this stupid little orb that's floating like a bubble in the water.
Even the drones that they sent out. They send out drones that, yes, work underwater, but when necessary can rise up out of the water and become an aerial drone. I do like the idea that humans, when necessary, will rally, will work together and come up with technologies that will help us adapt to different situations.
It's fun to play around with that. It does bring you back to that childlike imagination where anything is possible.
We are fascinated with monsters. They simultaneously attract and repel us. They arouse fear in us, but we keep trying to engage with them. So there's a kind of connection between us and monsters that, just can't be avoided.
What I like about monster stories is that there's something out there and you don't quite know what it is. It's mysterious and you're filled with wonder. So you can't help but go towards it, but also it could be dangerous.
Monsters represent things that we are, as a society, told to think of as taboo or forbidden in some way, things we're not supposed to do. But who hasn't had those moments of wanting to do things you're not supposed to do? So monsters attract us precisely because they represent the forbidden.
If you could put yourself in the place of a primitive human many thousands of years ago, the only light you got is from the campfire, and beyond that campfire is the darkness that's inhabited by monsters. Now take yourself down into a cave where maybe the shaman has drawn these wonderful pictures of saber-toothed cats and bears and dire wolves and woolly rhinoceros. And by the flickering torchlight, it would seem that these pictures were coming to life. And it's as if the mental ghosts of the things that would have given our ancestors nightmares are still with us.
Monster stories have been around forever. The earliest story we have is like the Epic of Gilgamesh, and even in the Epic of Gilgamesh, there's a monster. Gilgamesh has to fight a creature called Humbaba. And ever since then, religion and literature and folklore has been filled with monsters. I think it's a way in which different cultures process and handle their own fears.
Monsters represent the collective fears of the unknown. We come up with these different monsters, whether it be Godzilla or Kong, because we know that there's something else out there that is stronger than us, that we aren't really in control as much as we think we are.
Humans have always needed ways of exploring and responding to their primal fears. And that's just as true today as it was centuries ago.
The fear of monsters is so prevalent that it makes one think that it might be hardwired into the human mind. We see it in little children early on. We see it all over the planet. So it looks like the kind of thing that might be part of the architecture of human thinking and cognition. It might be in the brain, so to speak.
There is a deep-set origin point in all of us with monsters, which is, I think, every kid, long before they're dreaming about the heroes flying overhead, they're thinking about the monsters that are under their bed.
Our primitive ancestors lived on the plains of East Africa. They were preyed on by crocodiles, big cats, wild dogs. So this fascination with monsters, I think, is an ancestral survival tactic. It's been passed on, if you like, as a fossil memory.
We've all inherited this operating system of fear that has saved the species, really. So when we see something frightening like a predator, we don't have to think about it and theorize. We run. The body was built like this to keep us alive. And then we live in a sophisticated cultural world with air conditioning and central heating and lighting, and we're very far removed from the kind of African savanna where we evolved. But we still have this old operating system, sort of the reptile brain, the limbic system, and it's just aching to be activated. And so we find cultural ways to activate this fight or flight mechanism. And I think monster stories and monster movies are giving us a little roller coaster ride for the brain.
If you examine legends worldwide, you will find something that I have christened the global monster template. Every culture has its monsters. Take, for instance, the great-great-granddaddy of all the monsters, the dragon. It appears in all cultures on Earth, cultures that were never connected.
Whether it was South America, Asia, Europe, even Native Americans, you'll find dragons.
The dragon is very popular and known in the West as something that knights will fight, but of course it goes way back into Chinese history as well.
If you look at the dragons from Eastern cultures, they're actually seen as benevolent forces.
Dragons become what you might call a sticky meme. It's a meme that replicates all through culture. It's sticky in that sense because it's so exciting and weird and interesting that I want to look at it again, and I want to tell you about it, and you want to tell your friends. And in that way, dragons seem to be very sticky memes in the East and in the West. Sea monsters are actually very common all over the world. Sailors would come back with these stories of things they'd, half seen that didn't know what it was. You see these in the drawings of sea monsters. So cryptozoology and the idea of creatures out there that we don't know about came to be a huge sort of genre.
Cryptozoology is the study of hidden or unknown animals. Animals that have not been verified, have not been discovered. They're still on the fringes of zoology.
It's the science that looks at creatures that are as yet unknown to science, ones that are thought to be extinct but may still be lingering around, and ones of known species that have grown to fantastical dimensions.
Cryptozoology is not necessarily a field which is taken very seriously in the scientific community. Personally, I'm a fan of it. I wouldn't mind taking a few years off and having some adventures in that field myself.
Every once in a while, cryptozoology turns out to actually deliver a real animal.
There have been many animals thought to be purely mythological that were documented by science. These include the kraken, a giant squid from Norse maritime mythology. And of course, this was thought to be a complete fiction until they started turning up in the 1870s.
Off the coast of New England in the 1800s, a lot of reports of this giant tentacled creature. It was big and mean. There was reports of it coming up on boats and attacking boats, and so the giant squid was discovered.
Just when you think you know everything that's out there, Science actually does dredge up some creature that you've never seen before.
A lot of people don't believe in dragons, but we know dragons exist. In the 1920s, a man had a crash on the island of Komodo, and he saw these giant lizards that were over 6 feet tall that were eating babies, they were eating pigs, and the Komodo dragon was discovered.
And there are reports today of lizards several times larger than the Komodo dragon haunting the forests of New Guinea. Creatures like the mountain gorilla, the okapi, the coelacanth, the megamouth shark, they were all relatively recent discoveries. And that begs the question, what else is out there?
Humans have always been fascinated by monsters, and what has happened in, let's say, in the last couple hundred years is that we're moving into the modern world of monsters.
Monster stories have been around forever, but now we've got film, and I think this does change the monster story.
Cinema is a new part of the tradition of monster-telling stories that has existed for thousands of years.
There's a sense in which contemporary filmmaking and monster movies, well, they have an opportunity that previous storytellers never had, and I think that's really quite magical.
We introduced an organization called Monarch, which is really the gateway, the human gateway into the Monsterverse, which is this universe where these titan, iconic monster characters battle against one another and battle with us against other foes as well.
Characters like Godzilla and Kong and Ghidorah and Mothra, these giant monoliths of pop culture, they are the modern myths that we want to bring to the big screen. So with the Monsterverse going forward, we are building a universe that can bring these towering characters, literally towering characters to the big screen and have them interact and collide in ways that audiences have never seen before.
All monsters reflect the fears of their age, and movie monsters in particular, because they're projecting them to a wider audience. And the monster is constructed in a particular cultural period by the fears of the audience.
Godzilla is made at a time when the culture is absolutely horrified by the recent explosions in Hiroshima, Nagasaki. This is a world in which a nuclear threat was a reality and horrifying for people who lived through it.
The kinds of monsters that last are monsters whose story is flexible enough that it can deal with new kinds of situations. Godzilla, born in the aftermath of World War II, connected to the atom bomb, can yet metamorphose to be a figure for the kind of ecological interests, the worries about climate change and things that are bothering us now.
More than ever now, the human race, who are the real monsters at the end of the day, are destroying the world.
We are the infection.
The relationship between mankind and nature is central to really all giant monster films, whether it's Godzilla, Kong, Beasts from 20,000 Fathoms. They all have a very similar message, which is that Mother Nature will strike back.
And for us to modernize that, we really wanted to treat it as an allegory for global warming and climate change. Godzilla represents nature fighting back.
I mean, theoretically, you could take out the word Godzilla and just apply the word nature. You know, we have to form a symbiotic relationship with Godzilla/nature. We must find ways to live with Godzilla/nature. Because to me, that's what he's always represented. He's Mother Nature's 800 megaton gorilla. And Mother Nature, when threatened, will unleash Godzilla against whatever might be a threat, whether that be other monsters or us. There's a very deep and soulful intent to Godzilla underneath all the monster mayhem, whether it's about the horrors of atomic warfare or the threat to the environment that mankind can hold. It has a sort of mythic purpose.
It is really something about being human that asks us to sort of rehearse and think about our greatest fears and then develop a story in which they can sort of be handled or conquered. And when I do research on monsters, whether it's the latest Hollywood film or whether it's, you know, something in Aristotle's theory of monsters, I feel connected to this ancient human tradition
People who are sitting in a cinema watching a modern monster movie are engaging in precisely the same exploration of fear and terror and things that scare us as their ancestors were. It doesn't matter that we're doing it in a modern medium, it's the same process.
Sitting in the dark with an audience at a monster movie, we can think about it almost like sitting in the dark with our caveman tribe and people telling stories as the saber-toothed tiger roars in the background there. The sense of telling a story as a way, almost as a mantra against fear, against the possibility of death, against the monstrous there. I mean, I think it just goes to some kind of human essence, an essence in human history that goes directly from that caveman situation to the situation of sitting in the dark with people that we don't know watching a monster movie.
Godzilla is an icon. He is the biggest star in Hollywood.
Godzilla is my hero.
What is not to love about a nuclear atomic breathing megawatt monster?
Godzilla's dope.
Meet Titanus Mosura, or as we like to call her,
Mothra.
Mothra is probably the second most recognizable character from the Toho Monsterverse. She's the only female monster, and she has always been a force of good.
My favorite will always be Mothra. She just seems the most spiritual. I think those beautiful concepts of metamorphosis and rebirth.
She's always represented Mother Nature, and she's always represented the sort of cycle of birth, death, and rebirth.
Everything she does is fueled by a mother's maternal protective spirit to guard her young. But hell hath no fury like a mother scorned.
Rodan was always one of my favorites growing up. He is like a living atomic weapon.
Rodan comes out of this huge volcano.
He is very fast, very ferocious, and we aren't quite sure where his loyalties lie.
There's something very prehistoric about him. He's the one to me that most feels like a dinosaur.